As a state user of LUST4, I would enter my username and my password. In this case, I'm using a test user ID. Normally you would use the user ID that you have as an EPA employee for logging into the local area network, or the user ID as a state user that you have received through signing up through the EPA portal. I click the login button and I come into a screen that shows me my username, my role, and it shows me that there's no data currently available, which makes sense because we're just starting out. If there were data, I would be able to select the data by state, by year, etc. But for now, we're going to hit the Create New button, which will bring us into the initial data entry screen. This is the place where one enters the actual data for the measures that one is recording. Now, it tells me what the region and state are and what the year and reporting period are. This year and reporting period defaults to 2009 quarter 4. Of course, that will change as the quarters progress through time, and if there's more than one quarter open for data entry available at a time, you can select between them with this pull-down menu. Right now, it's just quarter 4 available. Now, notice that when I hover over some of these fields, I get a little question mark, which tells me that I can ask the question, well, what does this mean? So if I click on that, a window comes up which tells me more about what field it is I've clicked on. In this case, this is telling me what the direct versus indirect definitions are and what the initiated and completed definitions are, so that I can understand a little bit more about the data that I'm being asked to enter. I'll close that window. And here we have the place where one enters the main body of data. For direct site assessments initiated, the current amount for this quarter. If there were a correction applying to a previous quarter, that's where I would enter it in the correction field, but that doesn't apply here in this first quarter. And I can put in a comment. So I'll just start putting in some data. This is a comment. How do you like it? And so we have these 8 measures to be entered. You can put in current values and correction values if there are prior quarters to be corrected. So I will just put in some values here. Obviously I'm putting in test data, but you'll put in the real values. And I can at this point just save the record. I can also hit the recalculate button. If I do hit the recalculate button, notice that it totals up any previous value, which of course is 0 because we're starting out. There are no prior quarters to total in. The current value, any correction that would apply to prior quarters into the total. In this case, that's the same as the current, but in subsequent cases, in subsequent quarters, that total will be the sum of all of these numbers, which it is now, but most of them are 0. If I make changes, I can hit the recalculate button again, see that it's recalculated. Recalculation is optional. It'll recalculate automatically when you perform a save. Now, if I wish to save the record, I can hit the save button. If I decided I didn't like this record at all, I could delete it because I didn't really mean it or whatever. If I want to hit the Save and New button, that means save this record and also start a new one. It's unlikely that you're going to do that in this case as a state user because you'd only be entering data for one quarter in one year, one state, one region. So it's not as though you have multiple records to deal with. But I can save it. I can also submit it, which we'll get to in a little bit. But first I'll hit the Save button. So I hit the Save button, and now this original screen no longer says no data is available. In fact, I have data available to me. I have one record. And I have some summary information being displayed about that one record. If I press this Edit icon with a little pencil mark, that then shows me the same information, but allows me to go in and make changes. So if I make changes to it, I could hit the Recalculate button if I wanted to see that 6 become an 11, but when I save, it will, in fact, save that value. So I save it. Go in back into it again. I see that the 11 is in fact 11, and so it goes. If I wish to come in and out repeatedly, I can do so, making changes as I need. Eventually, I or my supervisor or whoever in the state is going to be responsible for finally submitting these records to the regional user will use the Submit button. What Submit does is it saves the record and changes its status such that it is no longer editable by the state, but in fact has been essentially sent to the region. It's not actually going anywhere, it's all in one database, but logically it goes to the region for regional attention. So I will, in this case, press Submit, Now I get this little notice that says the record has been submitted and it can't be modified unless it's sent back by the EPA region or headquarters. I can see the data, so I can still view what the comments were and what the values entered were, but I'll no longer be able to change it. If I hit the back button, I go back to my list, and I still see the record. I could still, quote, edit it, but I'm really not able to make any changes at this point. I get the message saying I can no longer edit it. So at this point, I will log out. I come over here to the log out button, because I'm done as a state user in this initial presentation.